Hi, this is Scott Garibay. Today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and I want to talk to all the dungeon masters out there about the timing of our stories and how we time what stories we tell. Okay? All right. There are spoilers for in this content for The Last Duel 2021. Last Duel 2021 is a really fascinating film, absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed this film, and I highly recommend it. I definitely think it's every dungeon master content for when they turn 18 or above. It's a hard film to watch. It's very complicated and it is a hard film to watch, but I am definitely recommending it. Brilliant film, directed by Ridley Scott. He did Aliens and Blade Runner, so we know he has some great ideas in his head. And he brings them to bear here. Written by Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, and I think a few other people in there. And starred in by Matt Damon and Ben Affleck and Adam Driver, Kylo Ren, and then also Jodie Comer. So they're the heart of this film. It's a really brilliant film. But I'm really fascinated by the timing of this story and what it says, and it landing right now to be available to the masses. Not in. So this movie was seen by virtually no one in the in the theaters. Incredibly small indie film, and I don't know if you could say a movie with the last Batman in it is an indie film. And Ridley, actually, I think that's wrong. This is a pretty mainstream film that no one saw, right? But it dropped on HBO Max where millions could see it, right? Just last week. So the timing of this is very fascinating. So let's listen to the story that Ridley Scott, Matt Damon, and Ben Affleck chose to make available to the world just last week, right? And because I want to talk about timing of our stories. All right, so here's the story. It's the story of Squire Legrease, and it is the story, and they said it's based on a true story. I don't think that's even relevant. This is the story they're telling. Because something comes through Hollywood. How much truth is going to be in it? I don't know. I think it's even easier to just think of this as fiction, because virtually nothing that Hollywood touches contains much truth. But their fiction is amazing and definitely can teach lessons if you're paying attention, right? Not the lessons they want you to learn, usually just the lessons you can bring forward by applying wisdom, right? All right, so here we go. So Legrease is a squire, okay, and he's played by Kylo Ren, Adam Driver. Okay, he does a fantastic job with the role, amazing job with the role. He's one of the best actors doing the thing right now. Matt Damon does a fantastic job. Now, it's no great surprise that Matt Damon does a great job. He's done, for years he's been tremendous at just really knocking it out of the park with a lot of different roles, right? And so Matt Damon's in there, and Matt Damon plays Knight Carouge. Okay, so this story is about an escalating conflict that is happening between Legrease and Carouge, right? And so basically, Legrease and Carouge are the same person from the perspective of society. They are men who are called to fight, right? And they approach it from two different ways. Legrease realizes he's called to fight, right? And he says, you know what? I don't want to fight. I can befriend this noble here, and then and I could just make myself useful with political maneuvering to this noble, who's played by Ben Affleck, right? And so Legrease says to himself, if I attach myself to this noble, I'll no longer have to fight, and I can just make my political maneuvers, and I can make people think I'm a helpful person by simply making political maneuvers. And he does this. And what's incredible is he actually and this noble that he's attached to is very, very villainous, does all kinds of evil acts, right? Betrays his wife routinely, is a judge, and knowingly makes and very, very knowingly uses his judge powers and his judge role to help his friend and harm people that he knows are in the right, even when his friends are wrong, right? So Legris is looking at himself and he's saying, I am joining this noble in villainy. I'm doing all the wrong acts. I'm knowingly taking the wrong actions. But I'm building a perception to the world that I'm helpful and that I'm useful, right? When the reality is he's incredibly destructive and outrageously selfish, right? But what's really interesting about the film is Legris knows it, right? And Legris is actually shocked how much the world receives his perceptions of help as real and valuable, right? And then he's also shocked as he looks at Night Carouge. And Night Carouge's life is completely structured different. Whenever he is called to fight, right? Carouge says, is this by God's will? Should I, by God's will, should I fight? Should I do the right thing because it is God's will, right? And Carouge never finds a circumstance where he always goes, whenever he's called to fight, not once is he put into a position where the fight is not within God's will as he sees it, having read the word or having the word read to him, right? And so Carouge builds this life of doing right and fighting exactly when it is necessary, with no delay, and taking the fight exactly to the enemy that needs to be put down at the exact moment it needs to happen. And connects it directly to it being the will of God and doing it because it is the will of God, right? And so you see these two men who are, who have been called to fight. One says, I'm not going to fight. I'm going to make people think I am useful and helpful in other ways that are not fighting. And the world massively rewards him for it, right? And another man who fights whenever it is necessary, right? No matter what people think, because it is God's will, right? And loses respect, gold, land, virtually everything that is valuable to him. And Legris gets everything that is valuable to him, right? And so finally, Legris does the final act of confrontation against Carouge's wife, right? And Carouge and Carouge's wife says, "I need you to get justice for me," right? And Carouge does. He says, he goes to the king and he says, "King, let me duel this man. Let me duel Legris." And so there's a duel between a man who had done good all his life, who had identified doing good and then drove straight toward it and never, ever hesitated to fight when it was God's will to fight, as he understood God's will and had strained to understand God's will. And he fought against a man who had specifically used political maneuvering to replace fighting that needed to be done, right? And what the movie showed is that the world gave respect and gold and land to Legris and gave nothing, almost nothing, to Carouge. But in the end, when the two people were weighed in the balance before God, right? What ended up happening was Carouge was lifted up to glory, and Legris died, and his body was hung for the birds to eat in shame. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating that Ridley Scott would choose this. Ridley Scott, Ben Affleck, and Matt Damon would choose this moment to have this story told. What it tells us is, as dungeon masters, we need to be very, very careful, right? What story needs to be told now, right? What story is going to fall into position for people to understand the art and understand the IRL? We must be incredibly careful as Dungeons & Dragons dungeon masters to tell the right story at the right time, when the wisdom that is needed by the world will be contained within ours. That is my opinion. What's yours? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Please consider liking and subscribing. Wolverines!